and it's preparing to live stream. So it's going to take us just a second, and then I'll go live on the webinar. And then we'll get started. Give me just a second. Hello, it says we're live. Can everybody hear me, Valerie and Suzanne? Welcome. So excited to be here with everyone tonight. I'm Sally Bradshaw with Midtown Reader, and we are delighted to have everyone here tonight as we welcome author Suzanne Allain to you this evening for the release of her new book, MISS LATTIMORE'S Letter. And I'm going to let Valerie hold that up, because as I shared with them earlier, mine is on my kitchen table at home where I have no wireless. So thank you for showing us that beautiful cover, Valerie. Suzanne is here with her friend and lifelong book lover, Valerie Souders, with whom she'll be in conversation tonight. And we're also excited, Suzanne, to learn about your most recent work, maybe talk a little bit about Mr. Malcolm's List as well, your self-professed love affair with Jane Austen, and many other fun things about this terrific Tallahassee. And we are so proud, Suzanne, to be your neighborhood bookstore at Midtown Reader, and greatly appreciate your support and Valerie's support for all independent bookstores and the work that we do. A couple of housekeeping items for the guest with us tonight. If you have a question for Suzanne or Valerie, I'll be monitoring the Q&A feature. So you can go to the bottom of your screen, put your question into the Q&A, and there will be a point at which we try to get to as many of those as we can. If you have not already ordered or picked up your book, stop by Midtown Reader in Tallahassee or visit our store online, www.midtownreader.com. Suzanne will be signing books, which is very generous. So thank you, Suzanne. She stopped in today. She said to sign a few books. We're grateful. If you are not in Tallahassee, please purchase your book from your local independent bookstore. And now, introductions for our author and her special guest. Suzanne Allain, as many of you know, is a screenwriter who lived in New York and Beijing before returning to her hometown of Tallahassee, where she lives with her husband. She makes frequent visits to Los Angeles for her screenwriting work, but one of her most memorable trips, and hopefully we'll hear about this some, was a recent trip to London to see her script based on her novel, Mr. Malcolm's List, Overture, which is being filmed, or was being filmed, I guess, at the time that she visited London. Welcome, Suzanne. And Valerie Souders has been a lifelong book lover and joined Instagram's book community in September of 2015 with her account Rendezvous with Reading. She especially likes historical fiction and classic novels. She says, paired with a good cup of tea, don't we all? In addition to reading, Valerie enjoys travel, home renovations, and gardening. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you.
And now to a brief introduction of our book, Miss Lattimore's Letter. I don't want to spoil the conversation, so no spoiler alerts here. I'll simply share that Suzanne's book is just getting rave reviews, just as Mr. Malcolm's List did. Miss Lattimore's Letter got a starred review from Library Journal. They said, get ready to read well past bedtime with Allain's classic Regency romance and its shrewd, funny heroine, who turns her talent for matchmaking into a match of her own. So tonight we'll hear about a woman who never made a match of her own, but is making matches for everyone else in this Regency era comedy of manners. So much fun. With that, thank you both again, and thanks to our participants. Valerie, I'm going to turn things over to you. And then at about 7:40, we'll come back to work in some questions for you and Suzanne from our audience. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sally. So I just want to show the cover again, and congratulations on the release, Suzanne. I just feel so privileged to be here to discuss it with you today. I read it last week and I enjoyed the witty dialogue. It was fun. And I love the matchmaking aspect of it. And I especially like the little hint of persuasion in there, giving a little nod to Austen. So could you maybe give us a little synopsis for those who aren't familiar with Miss Lattimore's Letter yet?
Sure, thanks, Valerie. So Sophie Lattimore, the main character, is a spinster of the advanced age of 28, which we know in Austen years is like 70. But she's accustomed to being overlooked, and she chaperones her younger cousin. And while doing so, she discovers a gentleman is about to make a disastrous match. She sends him an anonymous letter of warning, and eventually her identity is discovered. She becomes the talk of the town and begins to be regarded as an expert at love and matchmaking, which couldn't be farther from the truth, as she can't even sort out her own love life. So that's kind of a little synopsis. And while this is a follow-up to Mr. Malcolm's List, and it's also set in the Regency era, in this case, it takes place in 1817. It's not a sequel because it deals with an entirely new set of characters. But obviously from the title, I tried to tie it together thematically, and the existence of this written object, like in Mr. Malcolm's List, it was the list. Here, it's Miss Lattimore's letter. It drives the plot. And at the end of Mr. Malcolm's List, you will find the actual list on the very last page of that novel. In this book, on the very last page, you will find the letter that Miss Lattimore wrote.
Right. Yeah, I enjoyed that treat at the end when I got to the last page. So in this novel, which characters would you say that you relate to and why?
Well, I actually based one of the love stories. So there's multiple love stories in this book. I can't seem to just write one.
Right.
So there's at least 3 here. And one of the secondary romance is Sophie's cousin, Cecilia, who's her much younger cousin. And that was based on my real life romance. I met my husband when I was 18. And he was my best friend, but I kept going back and forth about committing to a relationship with him. And I don't want to give any spoilers for the book about what ends up happening with Cecilia's relationship, but the way her beau reacts is exactly the way my husband did at the end as well. So if you read my book, you'll discover a little bit of my love story as well.
That's so cool that you incorporated that for us. So when you're writing a novel, which comes to you first? Do you think of the characters first or the plot?
I would say it's the plot, but it's a very loose plot. And in this case, with Miss Lattimore's Letter, it was actually the title that came to me first. Because, I was trying to think of a way, like I said, to link it to Mr. Malcolm's List. So I thought of the title first, and then I thought, well, what would the letter be? And so I do outline, but you can't really call it outlining because it's so messy and not organized in the least. It's mostly just like little ideas. I usually just open a Word document and just start putting them in there as they come to me. And then as I think about it more and more, scenes actually will appear. And they won't appear in order. So I might think of a scene, towards the end of the book or the middle of the book or something, and I'll quickly write that down, and it comes with dialogue. So a lot of times my characters will start talking to me, which is always very nice. So then they begin to take on more shape, and then they begin to drive the plot, I would say. So I start with just it's not detailed at all as far as the outline. It's, like I said, it's very loose, and then the characters kind of fill it in as I go.
That sounds like it kind of gives you the leisurely pace to develop it as it comes to you. It's kind of interesting. Now, because you've written several novels now in the Regency period, do you find that this novel required less research? And like, where do you turn for your research process? What resources do you use?
That's a really good question. You would think it would require less, but it actually, I seem to always spend much more time than necessary on research, because I end up going down these rabbit holes with things that I don't even end up using. But the research sometimes also helps with the humor or helps me find a plot point. So one example in Miss Lattimore's Letter is there was the marriage ceremony that they use in England at that time. It was from the Book of Common Prayer, and it didn't change. It was the same. It wasn't like people, like a minister made up his own sermon for each wedding. They just recited it. They read it from this book. And so one of the scenes, I kind of make fun of the weight and heaviness of this of this marriage ceremony. It was just quite scary, actually, what they would say to the participants during the ceremony. So that research into, what was actually said at marriage ceremonies, and actually finding the Book of Common Prayer. Anyone could read it. It's online. In fact, there's thousands of copies because they used us for hundreds of years. So, they have some that were printed in, the 17th century, 18th century, 19th century. It was funny too, because it was used in the US in the 19th century as well. And when my book, Miss Lattimore's Letter, was being copy edited, the copy editor said, I think this changed and this wasn't being used in 1817, some of the parts I had quoted from the marriage ceremony. And I was like, oh no, because those were some of my best jokes, I thought. But then I realized it was the American Book of Common Prayer that had changed. The British one had not. And it was really funny to me because, Americans, they were a little more puritanical, or, so they had changed some of those parts that maybe they thought were a little, too much, like just that, like, marriage should not be undertaken for any carnal reason, or things like that. Maybe they thought that was a little too much. So in America, they took that part out. But I was glad to know that the phrases I used were still in use at that time, so I didn't have to change that chapter of my book.
I found that scene very interesting too, because I really wasn't familiar with the vows that were taken, or like what the minister said in one of those ceremonies. So that's really interesting that you actually found those words in historical documents. So, I mean, obviously you love the Regency era just like I do. What would you say prompted your interest in this time period? And are there other writers, whether of that time period or even modern day writers who write Regency novels, that inspire you?
Yeah, well, of course, Jane Austen, as Sally mentioned as she introduced us, was a huge influence, and I think that's obvious too in the way that my novels are written. They're in the same time period, of course, but also I just appreciated her humor and her characters and her, wry observations. So I imitate that to the best of my ability. Of course, no one can compare with the genius of Jane Austen, but I also was influenced by more comedic writers. So there's a writer, P.G. Wodehouse, and he wrote the Jeeves and Wooster series of novels, which was like a nobleman and his smart butler, kind of a dim-witted nobleman. And they take place, like, I believe in the Edwardian era, early 20th century. And I've kind of got a character like that in a lot of my books. So in Mr. Malcolm's List, there was Lord Cassidy. And in Miss Lattimore's Letter, there's Lord Courtney, which I just realized the names are very similar.
Yeah, they are. I hadn't thought about that either.
So, but yeah, he was an influence because he was just hilarious. If people have not read him, I would recommend him. He's really, really funny. And then Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. It was a play that was based on all of these different matches being made over the course of a very short time, and matchmaking, mistaken identity, those kind of tropes. And so I really like that. And then he was just so funny as well. And then Georgette Hare, who wrote, she was the first person to write Regency romances. So she wrote hers she started about 100 years after Austen died in the first half of the 20th century. And She was brilliant as well, but she was the inventor of the historical romance, because she, you know, she wasn't writing in Austen's era, but she was writing romances based in that time period. And she just did a ton of research. She was famous for knowing the kind of slang that people of that time used. And she just did so much research into that. So it's kind of, when you read her books, it's almost like reading a little bit of a different dialect sometimes with the expressions that she uses. So those were all influences. And then in particular for Miss Lattimore's Letter, like you mentioned, persuasion, that was, with Mr. Malcolm's List, it was influenced a little bit by Pride and Prejudice and Mr. Darcy and his definition of what made an accomplished woman in his eyes. With Miss Lattimore's Letter, I would say persuasion and Sense and Sensibility influenced me, because Sophie is an older heroine who missed out on her chance for love, just like Anne Elliot in Persuasion. And a great deal of Miss Lattimore's Letter is set in Bath, which was also the case for Persuasion. In fact, some of my characters visit the same shops and streets that Austen's characters did, or even Jane Austen herself, like Sydney Gardens. I found a letter where Austen mentioned, you know, she was complaining about the live music in Sydney Gardens. So
I think too, with Georgette and Austen both, they were such keen observers of people and their little quirks and habits. And I noticed that too with the characters that you've incorporated in Miss Lattimore's List, like the, oh goodness, her name's escaping me right now, Lord Courtney's mother.
oh yes,
Yeah,
Lady Small Piece.
Yes, that's it. She definitely has quite the rich attitude, and yeah, she's quite a character in herself. But it's interesting to observe her interactions, and you know how her station in life gives her undue attention, you know, maybe from others that are always trying to court her attention. And also, you know, the way she, what's the word I want? I don't want to give any spoilers away, but just the way she treats others. It was a good observation of her, I thought.
Oh, thank you.
Her
Yeah,
character.
I liked her also. She was, just said whatever she wanted, you know.
Yeah. There's always got to be someone like that in your novel, right? To keep it interesting.
Exactly.
So I wanted to ask you too, because as we've mentioned about Mr. Malcolm's List, you're also a screenwriter. Can you tell us, because I've always wondered a bit about this, how the role of a screenwriter differs from that of being a novelist? And do you find one of those styles of writing more challenging than the other?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because this is something that I like to talk about, because screenwriting, I kind of came to that later. I had written my novels first, but I remember somebody a long time ago, there was a review and someone said, oh, I could see this as a movie on one of my early books. And I thought, wow, yeah, a movie that incorporates mostly dialogue, which I enjoy writing, and I don't enjoy writing description as much. And so I took Mr. Malcolm's List and adapted it into a script. But I've also written scripts that are not based on novels of mine. In fact, I just finished one recently, and I really love screenwriting. I love it as a form. I just love that you have to only tell the story through things that people can see or hear. So it's so different from writing a novel, because, you know, in a novel, people want to read the characters' inner thoughts and feelings and motivations, and they want to know all those things, and they want to read description. But with a script, it's really the opposite. You can't, the only way you can convey those things is through, you know, what they can see, and each scene has to kind of just propel that story forward. So I find it an interesting challenge. I like it. I like screenwriting. Actually, I prefer it over writing books. But having said that, I like having written novels better than having written scripts, because screenplays, you just never know. It's just the blueprint for the final product. It's not the end product in itself, which a book is. So a book, you have a lot more creative control. You know, you get editorial suggestions, which I have a great editor and she gives wonderful suggestions that I'm happy to take. But you are the owner of that work. And with a script, it can be taken from you, and frequently is, and then just becomes, you kind of give up your child that you love so much. So it's just very different. And there are aspects of both that I absolutely love. And then there's aspects of both that, that aren't as fun, but it's fun that I get to do both, and that I've been able to write novels and scripts, and I continue to do so, because that also keeps my work interesting, because I can go back and forth, and it's fun.
I've always thought that the challenge of screenwriting would be to make the conversation seem so natural, and for the actors to take that conversation and convey, like everything else you said, that you have the freedom to convey in a novel with the setting and the emotion and all that. But yeah, I would think screenwriting would be challenging, but I'm glad that there's people like you who can do it. And I look forward to seeing how that translates with Mr. Malcolm's List when it comes out. So what are you working on next?
Well, like I mentioned, I just did finish a script. It's a departure from the historical world. It's a contemporary script that's kind of a psychological thriller. And it's I like to say, is the kind of like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind meets Vertigo or something like that, like Alfred Hitchcock. But it's so I've been working on that. So we'll see. You write scripts, you don't know if they'll ever see the light of day. I've had other things optioned that actually never went into production, other than Mr. Malcolm's List that did. So that was nice. But so we'll see. And then I've started a follow-up in this series. So we've got Mr. Malcolm's List, Miss Lattimore's Letter, and I'm working on a book that is also a literary object, but I'm not going to give away what it is yet. But but it is from the hero's point of view, and it's his object. So I'm switching back and forth, Mr. Malcolm's List, Miss Lattimore's Letter, and now the next one will be Mr. So-and-so something. And then I have an idea for a fourth one too. And that one I can tell you the title tentatively is Lady Pamela's Play. So I'm kind of still working in this series, and that's as many as I've come up with so far. I don't know if that'll be the fourth and final one, but
I'll be watching for whatever's next, that's for sure. So when you're not busy writing, and it sounds like you're busy with that quite full time, really. When you're not busy writing, though, what do you like to read for your personal enjoyment?
Well, I do enjoy, like I mentioned, Georgette Hare. I like historical fiction. I recently read Fiona Davis for the first time. I read Chelsea Girls. I really enjoyed that. There's a Victorian romance author that I kind of like, who's new to me, is Mimi Matthews. So I read a few of her works, which the titles are escaping me, but I would recommend those. They're fun.
I'll have to look her up.
Yeah. So I think I do like historical books. I also, I do like nonfiction, so sometimes I'll read memoirs. I do like that as well. And but yeah, I found that since the pandemic, I don't know, it's a little hard to concentrate on books all of a sudden. Actually, we were discussing that, and I might try audiobooks, because in the past I've never been able to focus on those, but you gave me the tip that you could speed up the narration.
Yeah,
And I'm like, oh, I might like that.
audiobooks have definitely been they've been a saving grace for getting anything read during the pandemic. For some reason, I'm struggling with that too. And yeah, I think the first audiobook I read a couple years ago now was To Kill a Mockingbird. And it was narrated by Sissy Spacek, and she does an excellent job at it. But I was listening to it on just the straight speed. I didn't know you could speed those up. So it because they talk so slow if you don't speed them up. So it really does help get through books faster, and I just stay more engaged if they're talking a little faster too.
And I will say with my audiobooks, so there's audiobooks from Mr. Malcolm's List and Miss Lattimore's Letter, and the voice actor, or I don't know what you call them, but Elizabeth Nolden, I believe is her name. She does an outstanding job. Yeah,
she really does.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed her narration of Mr. Malcolm's List. She's quite, she translates your dialogue quite perfectly, like snippy when she needs to be, or snarky, or she really does a good job with it.
It was interesting because they sent me a couple options for readers, and I noticed for her, I listened to something she read and I liked her, but also she had done like a radio play or something of a PG Woodhouse character.
Oh, wow, how perfect.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, I think I'll go with her. So I think it was a good choice.
Yeah. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention that we haven't discussed thus far?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the cover for both covers, Mr. Malcolm's List and Miss Lattimore's Letter. The artist who did that did a great job, but it was interesting because, oh yeah, there's Mr. Malcolm's List.
Yeah.
It was the same illustrator for both. And they asked me, did I have any ideas? So I actually sent them some source art, kind of get ideas from. And they asked me, what did the main characters look like? So there was actually a historical painting that I based Miss Lattimore on. But for Sir Edmund, I sent them a picture of Theo James, who was in Sanditon.
Yes.
And what was funny about this is this was at least a year ago. And now Theo James is actually in Mr. Malcolm's List.
I saw that.
In the film. So I just thought it was so funny that he's on the cover of Miss Lattimore's Letter, although he doesn't realize it's him. And now he's actually in the film that's going to be released, Mr. Malcolm's List.
That's perfect. Yeah, I did have to look up the cast. I did that just recently, in fact, because I was like, wow, it's really a star-studded cast. That's going to be.
It did change a little because Sam Hewen was originally going to be in it. Theo James took his place. Sam had to drop out because of conflicts with his Outlander schedule, and he was awesome too. I really liked him, and he was so supportive. He was like so supportive of my first book and would, post about it on social media. I was like, wow, I couldn't ask for, he was just a great guy. But yeah, Theo James is nice too. So at least they got a nice replacement for Sam.
That'll make Sanditon fans happy that he's landing in another Regency movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's meant to wear Regency clothes.
Well, we did have a couple questions from our audience, and just as a reminder, you can put any question into the Q&A and we will field those for you. So I'm going to interrupt and throw a few of these out to you, Valerie and Suzanne. You already answered Molly's question, which is what are you currently reading, or I guess what you've read lately. She was interested to know. I'm curious about any writing rituals or quirks you might have. We had an author on recently, Daniel Silva, who's a thriller writer who writes only longhand with a black Ticonderoga pencil. Is there anything you do that is sort of a ritual for you with every book when you start on your projects?
Well, I'm the opposite of him. I actually, use my laptop, and I feel like I have to type. Like, I've heard some writers, they'll even use like voice to text or, record. And I could never, ever do that. It just feels like it comes out of my fingers in a typing motion. So I always write on my laptop. I will say that that Miss Lattimore's letter was actually very difficult to write because 2020, was kind of a dark year. And because of the pandemic being confined so much. So it's very interesting. Like when you do go out to LA, there's a joke that the coffee shops are all full of screenwriters, but it's not a joke. It's actually real. Like you'll go and there will be all these people sitting there with their laptops, working on screenplays, drinking coffee. But one of the reasons I think that writers do that is because we like to have some kind of, exterior stimulus or something to be around people, to get inspired. So it was very hard to be in, my little place while I was working on Miss Lattimore's letter. So I found music to be inspirational. So I would play music to try to get me into a creative mood. And I would have a playlist, for a particular book. So I had one for Mr. Malcolm's List. I had one for Miss Lattimore's letter. Some of it could be music from that time period. So there's a song from Far From the Madding Crowd. I can't remember it now, but it's basically, do not let him take your time or something, but it's THYME. It's, it's like an herbal garden, but it's about, about those pesky men and how they can ruin your life. But anyway, it's an actual like folk song from the Regency era. So I would listen to that and listen to some of the music from the 2005 Pride and Prejudice soundtrack. And then also some modern music that was thematically similar to Miss Lattimore's letter. So that helped. I would also go online and tour like historic estates in England because I couldn't travel. So I would go, it's really nice how they have where you can, just take a virtual tour and kind of walk through all these old houses. So I based the Sir Edmund Winslow's estate on like a couple of those estates that I kind of pieced together different aspects of each of them. So I'm sorry, this is a very long-winded answer, but I don't have any writing rituals, but I have things to try to get me to be creative.
The creative mindset, yeah. Well, so too, that you brought up music, Alexis says, will we see any of the music from your playlist make its way into the film?
I don't think so. They actually, they hired a very good, I can't think of the word for the person, the composer, but whatever the word is for a person who does the music for film, I'm blanking here. But anyway, she's has come up with a lot of original music for the film, and it's really good. So I think they're just going to use, I don't think it'll be a Bridgerton thing where, Bridgerton, they used modern music that they kind of, re-recorded on older instruments, but I think they're just going to really stay true to the period.
Yeah. Amber asked us, how did you begin your journey of writing? Did you start off with short stories in school or poems?
Yes, I did start with short stories. I've been writing since I was a little girl. And when I was in 7th or 8th grade, I wrote my first novel. And it was, of course, a terrible, terrible novel. And it was handwritten in a notebook. And it was about 70 pages handwritten. So obviously it would not have been, it would probably have been a 30-page type, typewritten novel. But yeah, it was funny because I showed it to somebody who was in 8th grade. I was in 7th grade, and she loved it so much and offered to be my agent. Needless to say, it went nowhere. Neither of us had connections, and actually it was not a very good book. So
That's terrific. So you mentioned research. At one point when you and Valerie were talking, you said you mentioned finding a letter where loud music was actually complained about. How much time do you still spend on research, or do you feel like you know that period so well, it's not required? Is it required for every book that you write, or you just build on what you've already researched and learned?
it's required for every book and every script. I just find that research is what kind of is the thing that propels the story forward. And so if you can incorporate research in a way that doesn't seem like you're lecturing people, it just really adds so much color to your story. So whatever era I'm in and whatever genre I'm writing in, I always do research. I love research. And it was funny, I found this advertisement when I was writing Miss Lattimore's Letter, and I didn't use it, but I saved it because I was like, oh, this would be great. So it's from an 1814 London newspaper, and it says, the advertiser, being a widower but preferring the marriage state, takes this method of declaring it. Any widow or single lady about 35 years of age, of moderate income, and of a good and cheerful disposition, likewise preferring the marriage state, may, by addressing a letter directed to so-and-so, no further particulars, if the advertiser is convinced of the sincerity of the parties. Letters must be postpaid, else will not be taken in. So I thought that was so funny, because if you wrote a story where, a widower placed an ad in the paper for a wife, people would think you made it up. But it really happened in 1814. This man really wanted a wife.
So I'm going to put both you and Valerie on the spot a little. I'm always fascinated about the relationship between reader and writer. And, so many people have read your book, Suzanne, who you'll never meet, you'll never get a chance to speak with and be in communication with. But I love that Valerie is in communication with you tonight. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys connected and met over your books?
Yeah, it was on Instagram. So Valerie has a bookstagram account, like she mentioned, and I wasn't following her, but I guess, Valerie, maybe you just tagged the title, Mr. Malcolm's List, or?
I think it was last summer when I read Mr. Malcolm's List. I loved it so much. I reviewed it, of course, on my account, and then also I think I featured like a clip from the short in my story too.
Yeah. So that's how she came to my attention, is because I saw that she had posted a really nice, favorable review of my book, which obviously makes me happy. But then I looked at her actual feed and I started following her, and I felt like we had similar tastes. So she likes classic novels and historical fiction. And so then when this came up, I thought, oh, maybe she could interview me, since we seem to have a lot in common.
Well, we're so glad that she did. And Valerie, I posted your Instagram feed in the Q&A so that people can follow you there, along with Suzanne's website. We have a question from Gloria. She says, what is it about the Regency period that appeals to you as a time for your novels?
So I think because it's, even though I'm sure historically it was a terrible time to live, they didn't have the modern conveniences we have now, but perhaps because of Austen's novels, this idea of happily ever after, and that so much was, based on, also there was so much conversation, it was like, they didn't have the modern distractions we have. So you could just see like people getting to know each other through good conversation. And so I don't know, I'm not sure what appeals to me about the Regency. I also feel like it's an era for some reason that, is inherently funny, maybe because of the characters that, like, Valerie was mentioning one of the characters in mine was Lady Smallpiece. So you've got, just a variety of characters, and maybe because of the nobility and how it's always fun to poke fun at them, which actually Austen did as well, because if you look at her noble characters, they were usually the most ridiculous. So like Lady Catherine de Bourgh and there's more, but they're not coming to me at the moment. But anyway, so they were the ones who she would kind of poke fun at as well. So, and they're safe targets. So
I always think too, like you mentioned Lady Catherine, I always think too of like Mr. Elliot in Persuasion. He was so kind of pompous and stuck on himself. And we were talking yesterday, and we were just saying how Austen was just so brilliant at taking not just her main characters, but even her minor characters are so well developed. Like one of my favorites is Miss Bates. And then we talked about Emma's father, how he's such a hypochondriac. And the things that they say just is like Suzanne just mentioned, pokes fun at their weaknesses, but it says a lot that she's still so popular today that we keep seeing her movies be remade. I think too, I really like the social structure of that time period, because it is so entertaining to see the different classes and the interactions between them. So Suzanne translates that time period so well in her novels. I think that's why they're so appealing. So I can't wait for the next one already.
So to that point, and maybe this is a good way to close things out. If you could have dinner with any of your characters or any of Jane Austen's characters, Suzanne, who would you have a meal with? And same to you, Valerie, if you could have dinner with Austen's characters or Suzanne's characters, who would you get together with? You want to start, Suzanne?
Okay, I was going to say, who do you want to start? I would have dinner with Elizabeth Bennet. She is definitely my favorite Austen heroine. As far as the male characters, actually, I like from Northanger Abbey, I like Henry Tilney. He's very funny, and I think he would be a lot of fun. So those are my two picks.
I have to agree with you on Elizabeth Bennet. And as much as I like Mr. Darcy, I have to say Frederick Wentworth from Persuasion. I mean, that man can wield a pen and write a good letter. So I think I'd have to go with him, because Darcy's a little awkward in that way. And we already know Darcy's not good on conversation. So
That's true.
I think I'd go with Wentworth.
Karen, we do have another viewer question, so I'll pop this in. Karen asked if you could bring back one novelty from the Regency period that has been lost for modern day, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think a ball would be fun. I mean, it just seems like, we don't dance like that. I mean, I guess people go to clubs, but that's not really the same. I think that would be fun to have. And then like I liked this about the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, is that they showed how athletic the dancing was, and like they were all sweating and they were bouncing around, and just seems like it would be good exercise.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. Valerie, any closing comments or questions, or same to you, Suzanne?
Just thank you for having us. I really enjoyed this experience.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. And support your independent bookstores wherever you are. And Midtown Reader is a great shop too. And as Sally mentioned, I'll go by and sign any books. So if you order, no matter where you live, if you order from them online, I'll be sure to sign them and they'll mail them to you.
Great holiday gifts too for family or friends, personalized from our author, Suzanne Allain. It's such an honor to have you. Valerie, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
joining us in conversation. Again, midtownreader.com to order signed copies, or you can drop by the store. And if you're not from, we have one last question. Do you mind if I go to this last one? They keep wrapping up. Oh, no, it's not a question. It's a comment. Great job to all participants. I agree. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Valerie. Thanks to
you.
those of you for joining us online, and we hope to see you at Midtown Reader or your local independent bookstore soon. You guys have a good night. Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.